We are extremely pleased that you are here. It is good to come together for the purpose of co-creating, is it not? You are ready for us.
Esther said the last couple of days, she said, I have never been so happy in my life. I've never felt so good. Like today, she just says, I just feel so wonderful. And she just talks about how beautiful everything, how wonderful and how joyous. And yet, in the middle of the night, night before last
night,
I heard her awaken, and I awakened. Then I heard by her breath that there was a sense of a negative occurring. And I said, are you dreaming? Did you dream? I knew she was awake. I said, did you have a dream? She said, yes. And so she went on to tell me about the dream where we were going to Munich. And I said, we were boarding the plane. We'd gone through customs and so on. And Esther said, and I said, Esther, go ahead and get on. I'll be right behind you. And she went on, and then she said she went forward to hold a seat for us rather than wait at the gate, because she said, I should have waited at the door to make sure you got on, but I sat in the seat, and the stewardess and wouldn't let me get back off when the plane was leaving. And I was leaving you with no passport, no checks, no dollars, no money, no nothing, just because I don't ever carry anything in my pocket except my car keys. And so I was stranded there in New York City at the airport with nothing. I mean, no identification. And Esther's on her way to Munich. And so that's the dream she awakened with, which is a version of a dream that she has as long as we've known each other. How can someone so happy and so joyous still have a dream like that is my first question. And my next question is the dream, in other words, is the dream, just like Esther translates for you into words, like you said, you can give a block of thought to her in a second or a fraction of a second, that it takes her minutes or hours as the words unfold out of her mouth. Is the dream a little similar to like that? When you wake up with that block of thought and then you come up with these words, physical words, that get a point across of what the dream, the inherent story or the message behind the dream was.
That is the way.
Would you discuss that a little bit?
Your dreams are offered to you from your inner being, and they are offered in pure blocks of thought. And you receive your dream in a split second, and then it unravels into your consciousness. And the data of your experience is what is the format for the dream. In other words, that is difficult for you to accept in most cases because you recall the vivid details of the dream, and it was as if you were there in some sort of other dimensional state. But that is the way you were interpreting or unraveling the block of thought. And what is behind this with Esther is a sense of leaving you unprepared. In other words, she has been concerned about so much of what is happening in your experience being outside of your control and within her control. And she is feeling a little uncomfortable with you in a situation where you are not aware of more of what is happening. That is primarily some pondering of some thoughts along that nature.
When we first married, I'd heard of so many cases where, all through my lifetime, where the male passes on and the wife doesn't know how to even sign a check or anything. So I did turn everything over to Esther, so I don't do anything anymore. And so it would be the case. I probably wouldn't have to know how to do anything. I'd be in the position of the...
It is primarily coming about because of the new computer. In other words, everything in your life is now buried deep within the new computer, where it is lost to you, you see. And Esther she ponders that almost daily as she is putting more and more into the computer. She feels that she is putting more of a gap between you and your own experience.
And so she doesn't like that dream. And so what does she do to not have that dream anymore?
When she awakened, she said to us, Abraham, what is that about? You interrupted our conversation when you spoke to her.
Oh, I see.
And we were in the process of explaining to her it is about giving attention to what you are not wanting. It is about giving your attention to separation rather than being together.
Okay. Next thing. I noticed I've used the information you gave me so that I can mow the lawn and breathe in all that wonderful grass and pollen and trash and stuff and not be affected by it. And but yet I'll go to sleep at night and I'm breathing properly. And then the instant I awaken in the morning, there's like a flash, a fraction of a second that I'm aware that I'm breathing perfectly and there's no restriction or any tickling or sensations or sensations. But then the very next breath, it's as if I breathed in a whole lung full of, in other words, I feel like sneezing and snorting and everything else. And then I have to get up and it takes 2 or 3 hours to release it all to where I'm breathing normally again. So I know it's not real, or I should be doing that way while I sleep. So what happens in my mind the minute I take my first awakened breath that changes everything? In other words, why can I sleep so and breathe that same air, and then in the morning, the first breath that I take awake, I have a reaction to?
You are really going to like this.
Good.
It is your resistance to well-being. Now, what is resistance to well-being? It is hammering away at this, hammering away at that. In other words, it's attention to what you don't like. It is the decision to deal with what you do not want.
So the first breath means I'm starting to deal with something.
Hear this. Your conscious decision to deal with what is wrong is the way you resist allowing what is right. This is very important, isn't it? Much of the world is not ready to hear it because they really believe that everything comes through action, which means dealing with something in some way. If you don't like that, fix it. If that is broken, fix it.
So how do I get 3 breaths in a row like the first one in the morning?
We would encourage you to set your thoughts in motion even before you go to sleep at night. Lie in your bed and ponder the refreshment that will take place during your sleep. Acknowledge something that you really believe, which is that as you slumber, you will breathe normally and breathe very efficiently and very effectively and very comfortably. Establish that thought first. As I slumber, all will be well. And when I awaken in the morning, it is my intent to continue to allow the same well-being that my inner mind allows as I sleep.
I always did that before we met you, but I'm not doing it so much anymore for some reason.
Your sneezing began with Abraham.
No. I always, all through the years, if I had anything bothering me physically, I would always say as I was going to sleep, tonight this will heal itself, in the morning I'll be well. In the morning I would always be well. If I had a terrible headache or whatever, it would be gone the next day, almost always, because I expected it to be gone.
A headache is something that is easier to release because it is something that is infrequent. It comes easily and it goes easily. But something that has to do with your breathing, the longer you've experienced something, the more attached to it you are, and the more you resist the natural release of it, you see. Now, even the word healing is a word that brings forth resistance, because the idea that I must heal is giving the attention to something being broken or something being out of order, you see. Really what we're talking about, and we are appreciating more than our words can express your very clear statement as you say, I am breathing perfectly well in the time of unconsciousness, and in the moment that I return to consciousness.
Yes.
And so it is rather obvious that in the consciousness there is resistance to well-being. Now, why would there be conscious resistance to well-being? Could it be because you are constantly bombarded with illness across your radio and television? Could it be that everywhere you look there is illness? Could it be because your telephone rings day and night with people who are calling who are sick? Could it be that you are so filled with thoughts of not well-being that as most physical creatures you accept illness as the norm and wellness as something weird?
You bring up a good point, because in all the places that I've lived in my life before San Antonio, when I turn on television, which I haven't watched much in my life until San Antonio, but when I did, they never had a pollen and mold count. And but here every day they tell me how much pollen is in the air. Watch out, you hay fever sufferers, because the pollen count is the mold count, and the red and the green stuff is.
And so think about what happens when you hear that. In other words, if someone says to you there's someone outside the door and he has a weapon and he's going to come in and point it at you, does not a feeling of defensiveness rise within you? Do not you find something to put between you and him? Do not you find yourself feeling resistance? And so that is what is happening when your awareness of this bad stuff out there, innocuous as it may be or big and terrible as it may be, your awareness of it is the awareness of that stuff out there within you brings forth within you a resistance. And so you find yourself trying to explain to somebody why you should be the one not to have it. In other words, the defensiveness, the rationalizing, the justifying rises within you. Or the action of defense. And what we are wanting you to understand, we'll say it again, you have nothing to defend against, for you are the attractor of all of it. And so what we would recommend, as you hear those statements, is that as you hear them, you draw a sort of mental image. You see the world as assorted jelly beans, and you only like the green and the yellow ones. They're all out there, but nobody's thrusting them in your mouth. You get to reach out and pick the ones that you are wanting to eat, you see. In other words, those jelly beans are not going to come after you and force themselves into you or upon you. And neither are the pollens or the molds or the cancers or the AIDS or the poverty or the none of that stuff can come to you. There is no such thing as law of assertion. None of it has power outside of you. You are the attractor of every part of it.
One last little technical question. So let's say I've ridden my bicycle and I've skinned my knee. And is it going to heal faster when I'm asleep, or is it going to heal faster when I'm awake? Would I be better sleeping 12 hours a day if I wanted to heal fast, or would I be better sleeping 4 hours a day if I wanted to heal fast, as far as my skinned knee?
Your body actually heals better when you are awake, because the more, if your mind were clear, because the more oxygen, the more energy, the more blood flow, the more motion, the better your body does. And lying in a very still position with everything slowed down, the healing process slows down also. But because most of you concentrate upon what is wrong when you are conscious, your thoughts work against it. And so most of you do more healing when you're asleep. But you could do more healing when you're awake if you could not resist wellness, you see.
That makes sense. If you could not resist. It wasn't for thought. That's the if.
This is a time of increased energy. And those of you who are sensitive are aware of it. In other words, things are manifesting more quickly today than 1 year ago, much more quickly. Your thoughts are more powerful today. The thought reaching the next, reaching the next, reaching the next. And so many of you who are used to feeling very good are finding yourselves feeling a little less than wonderful because the influence of vulnerability which exists within your society and the increased energy is bringing many of you to a place of feeling some of your physical sensations more. We've been monitoring many of you, and we are wanting you to understand that these sensations, now here is the scenario that we are observing in most of you. You wake up one day and you don't feel quite like you did yesterday. Now, it could be you may have picked something up which used a new muscle that you're not used to using. Or you may have eaten something that is not settling in your system the way what you usually, any number of things. We will not go into the sordid details, but the result is you feel a little less than wonderful or a little less than, and so what usually happens is you notice it. You notice the difference between feeling good and feeling bad, and you say, I wonder what's wrong. Now your attention is upon it.